This is Sofia. My mother-in-law told me I wasn't invited to the family Christmas gathering, said I was too common for their social circle, that my presence would embarrass them in front of their elite guests. She didn't expect me to show up anyway. And she certainly didn't expect the helicopter landing on their pristine lawn, or the billionaire CEO stepping out beside me, ready to expose every lie they'd built their empire on. Mrs. Castellano, your husband's online too, and don't forget the Riverside Country Club meeting at 3. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Kevin, my assistant, set down my espresso with the same precision he'd perfected over 5 years, but something in his tone made me glance up from the architectural rendering spread across my glass desk. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, illuminating the scale model of the Meridian Tower, the sustainable housing project that had consumed the last 18 months of my life. Did Marcus say what he wanted? I kept my voice neutral, though my stomach tightened in that familiar way it had been doing lately. My husband hadn't called my office in almost 6 months. We'd become experts at communicating through calendars and text messages, our marriage reduced to logistics and polite distance. He just asked if you'd be ready by 7 tonight. Said his mother insists on discussing the holiday arrangements. Kevin hesitated at the door, his fingers drumming against his tablet in that nervous gesture he only did when he sensed trouble. Should I block out tomorrow morning? Just in case? I nodded, turning back to the renderings that represented everything I'd built from nothing. Castellano Development Group. 12 years ago, I'd been a junior architect working 80-hour weeks in a cramped studio, eating ramen and sketching dream projects on napkins. Now I ran one of the city's most innovative development firms, with 43 employees, 3 major projects, and a reputation for transforming neglected neighborhoods into thriving communities without displacing the people who lived there. The wedding photo on my credenza caught my eye, Marcus and me on the courthouse steps, both of us laughing at something my mother Rosa had said. That was 9 years ago, back when Marcus still defended my work at family dinners, before his mother Vivian had started her campaign of subtle corrections and not-so-subtle disappointments. Sofia, you're doing that thing again. Jessica's voice pulled me back to the present. We sat at our usual window table at Lucia's Bistro, the lunch crowd humming around us with the energy of the financial district at midday. My best friend since architecture school stabbed at her Caesar salad with more force than necessary, her dark eyes narrowed with concern. What thing? That thing where you zone out and get that little crease right here. She touched the space between her eyebrows. When's the last time Marcus actually came home before midnight? And I mean home, not sneaking in at 2 a.m. claiming he was at the office. He's been stressed about the quarterly reports. You know how intense Vivian gets about the family investment firm. Even as I said it, I heard how weak my defense sounded. How many times had I made excuses for him this year? Sofia. Jessica set down her fork, leaning forward with that expression that meant she was about to say something I didn't want to hear. I went through this with David. The late nights that turned into overnight business trips. The way he'd guard his phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. The sudden interest in my business finances, asking about accounts, partnerships, property deeds. Has Marcus been asking about your company structure lately? I pushed lettuce around my plate, remembering last month when Marcus had casually suggested I might want to add his name to certain documents. For estate planning purposes, he'd said. Vivian had mentioned it would be more appropriate for a married couple. More professional. It's fine, Jess. Really. His mother just likes everything done a certain way. His mother. Jessica's tone could have etched glass. You mean the woman who spent your entire wedding reception telling people you came from humble beginnings? Who introduces you as Marcus's wife before mentioning you're a CEO? Who conveniently forgets to invite you to family events until the last minute? I didn't answer, because we both knew she was right. Vivian Montgomery had never forgiven her son for marrying someone who wasn't from their world of old money and country club memberships. Someone whose parents had been public school teachers instead of hedge fund managers. Someone who'd built her success through 70-hour work weeks instead of inheriting it. The walk back to my office took 15 minutes. I'd been timing everything lately, creating structure and schedules that gave me the illusion of control. 4 minutes through the lobby. 3 minutes in the elevator. 2 minutes down the corridor to my office suite. Except today, something was wrong. Mrs. Castellano, I'm so sorry. Rebecca from finance practically jogged to intercept me in the hallway, her normally calm demeanor cracked with anxiety. There's been an issue with the building access system. IT is working on it, but your key card isn't registering in the database. That's impossible. I'm the CEO. My credentials should have the highest clearance level. I know. Mr. Castellano called this morning. Said something about a security audit for insurance purposes. Corporate restructuring protocols. Rebecca's hands twisted together. The request came through official channels. His signature was on the authorization form. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. My husband had locked me out of my own building. 20 minutes later, James from IT got me inside, apologizing profusely while explaining about system updates and verification processes. He assured me my full access had been restored and that he'd flagged my account to prevent any future, unauthorized security audits. But I'd already pulled up the security logs on my phone. The audit request had been submitted yesterday at 2:15 p.m., exactly when I'd been in the presentation meeting with the Riverside Development Committee. Marcus knew my schedule. He'd planned this timing deliberately. This was a warning shot, testing how much control he could exert. In my office, I stood at the windows overlooking the city I'd helped reshape, one sustainable building at a time. My reflection stared back at me, tailored navy suit, pearl earrings, the careful polish of someone who'd learned to dress for rooms where she wasn't initially welcome. When had I stopped being Sofia Reyes, the architect with paint under her fingernails and dreams bigger than her bank account? When had I become Mrs. Castellano, apologizing for taking up space? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mother wants us at the estate by 7. Important family discussion. Don't be late. No, how was your day? No, looking forward to seeing you. Just orders, delivered in the same tone Vivian used when managing her staff. The drive to the Montgomery estate usually calmed me, through the city streets that held my finished projects, past the community gardens I'd funded, into the exclusive gated neighborhood where old money whispered behind iron gates and manicured hedges. But tonight, Marcus sat rigid in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone with an intensity that radiated avoidance. Your mother said this was about holiday arrangements? I tested, keeping my voice light. Are we doing Christmas Eve at the estate this year? Something like that. He didn't look up, his thumb moving across the screen in rapid swipes. She has some ideas about the guest list. Plans for the new year. We usually spend Christmas morning at my mother's apartment. The tradition we started our first year married? I could hear the pleading note creeping into my voice and hated myself for it. Things change, Sofia. His thumb stopped scrolling. Mother thinks it's time we prioritized family obligations differently. The BMW in the circular driveway was new, midnight blue with dealer plates still attached, parked at an aggressive angle that suggested either confidence or carelessness. Marcus muttered something about business associates and corporate consultants as he exited the car, leaving me to follow. I sat for a moment, my hand resting on my purse where the small velvet box pressed against the leather lining. Inside was a vintage compass, my grandmother's, the one she'd used when she first immigrated here, finding her way in an unfamiliar country. I'd been carrying it for weeks, planning the right moment to give it to Marcus. A symbol of new beginnings, of finding our way together through whatever came next. I had my suspicions about what that next might be, subtle changes I'd noticed but hadn't confirmed yet. But first, we had to survive whatever Vivian had planned for tonight. The Montgomery mansion blazed with light against the December darkness, every window glowing like a stage set. Through the glass, I could see figures moving in the formal living room, hear the murmur of voices and the clink of crystal. This wasn't a quiet family dinner. This was something else entirely. Marcus held the door open, still not meeting my eyes. They're waiting in the library. Walking through that doorway, I thought I was walking into just another uncomfortable evening of Vivian's passive-aggressive comments and Gregory's silent enabling. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Another night of being reminded I wasn't quite good enough, quite polished enough, quite pedigreed enough for their world. I adjusted the compass in my purse, took a breath, and stepped into what I didn't yet know would be the ambush that would change everything. The library stretched before me, leather-bound books lining walls that had witnessed generations of Montgomery family decisions. And seated in the wingback chairs, champagne glasses in hand, sat people I'd never seen before, alongside Vivian, whose smile suggested she knew a secret I was about to discover in the most painful way possible. The library smelled of old leather and Vivian's signature Chanel perfume, a scent I'd come to associate with criticism delivered in honey-coated tones. The fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows across faces I was just beginning to recognize. Vivian stood at the center of the room like a conductor preparing for a performance, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, wearing the diamond necklace Gregory had given her for their 40th anniversary. "Sofia, darling. So glad you could make it." Her voice carried that particular warmth she reserved for moments when she was about to strike. Come in, come in. We have some wonderful news to share." Gregory sat in his usual chair by the window, already on what looked like his third scotch, avoiding eye contact in the way he'd perfected over 9 years of watching his wife dismantle my confidence piece by piece. Marcus's sister Isabel perched on the sofa, her designer dress perfectly pressed, her expression caught somewhere between guilt and anticipation. But it was the woman in the emerald green cocktail dress who captured my attention. Mid-30s, auburn hair styled in effortless waves, holding a champagne flute like she belonged here. Like this was already her home. "Everyone, I'd like you to properly meet Natalie Ashford." Vivian's hand rested on the woman's shoulder with maternal affection I'd never received. Harvard Business School, previously with the Sterling Group, and most recently, she's been consulting with Marcus on some exciting new ventures for Montgomery Investments. Natalie's smile was practiced, professional. "It's lovely to finally meet you, Sofia. Marcus has told me so much about your little development projects. How charming that you're so passionate about affordable housing." The word "little" landed like a slap. My little projects had won 3 national sustainability awards and transformed 4 neglected neighborhoods. But I kept my expression neutral, trained by years of board meetings where being underestimated was sometimes an advantage. "Natalie's been invaluable these past few months," Marcus said, moving to stand beside her with an ease that made my chest tighten. "Her expertise in corporate restructuring has been exactly what we needed." "Corporate restructuring?" I looked at my husband, searching his face for the man I'd married. "Montgomery Investments has been stable for decades. Why would you need restructuring?" Vivian's laugh was light, dismissive. "Oh, Sofia. This is precisely why we've brought Natalie on board. You focus on your charity work, which is admirable, truly, but understanding high-level financial strategy requires a certain sophistication." Richard Langford, a man I now recognized as one of Gregory's golf partners, leaned forward from his position by the bookshelf. "What Vivian is trying to say, delicately, is that Montgomery Investments is preparing for significant expansion. We're consolidating assets, streamlining partnerships, positioning for the next generation of leadership." The next generation. Vivian's words hung in the air like a pronouncement. Which brings us to the real reason for tonight's gathering. The holidays are a time for family, for tradition, for maintaining standards. She paused, savoring the moment. "This year's Christmas celebration will be quite special. We're hosting the Vandermeer family, you know, the Vandermeers of Vandermeer Capital. Old friends, prestigious connections. The guest list is extremely curated." I felt the trap closing but couldn't yet see its full shape. "That sounds lovely. What time should Marcus and I arrive?" The silence that followed was deafening. Isabel suddenly became fascinated with her champagne glass. Gregory drained his scotch. Marcus studied the Persian rug with intense concentration. "Well." Vivian's smile sharpened. "That's what we need to discuss, dear. The thing is, the Vandermeers are rather traditional. Old money, you understand. They value certain pedigrees, educational backgrounds, family lineages. She paused, letting each word land with deliberate precision. Given your background, which is perfectly respectable for what it is, we thought it might be more comfortable for everyone if you perhaps spent Christmas with your own family this year. The room crystallized into sharp focus. The way Natalie's hand rested casually on the back of Marcus's chair. How Isabel wouldn't meet my eyes. The satisfied curve of Richard Langford's mouth. Gregory's cowardly silence. You're uninviting me from Christmas. My voice came out steadier than I felt. We're being realistic about social dynamics, Vivian corrected, as if explaining something simple to a child. The Vandermeers expect a certain level of refinement. And frankly, dear, with your tendency to discuss construction projects and low-income housing at dinner parties, well, it creates awkward moments. She turned to Natalie with practiced grace. Natalie, of course, went to Exeter Academy with Caroline Vandermeer. They've been friends for years. Marcus? I looked at my husband, giving him one chance to defend me, to remember the man he'd been when we'd stood on those courthouse steps. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was worse than anger or hatred. It was indifference. Mother has a point, Sofia. This is an important connection for the firm. The Vandermeer deal could be transformative. Maybe it's better if you sit this one out. Sit this one out. I repeated the words, tasting their betrayal. Christmas. With your family. That I've been part of for 9 years. Oh, don't be dramatic. Vivian waved her hand dismissively. We'll do something nice for New Year's. A quiet dinner. Just family. The emphasis on just family made it clear I no longer qualified for that designation. Natalie shifted slightly, and I caught the flash of something on her wrist, a bracelet I recognized. The vintage Cartier piece Marcus had claimed was a gift for a major client last month. The credit card charge that had shown up as business development expenses. How long? The question escaped before I could stop it. Natalie's eyes widened slightly. Marcus's jaw tightened. Vivian's smile grew triumphant. How long has this been planned? The restructuring. The consulting arrangement. The Christmas exclusion. All of it. My hands remained steady at my sides, years of maintaining composure in hostile boardrooms serving me well. Sofia, you're being paranoid, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? I pulled out my phone, unlocking it with deliberate calm. The screen glowed with the folder I'd been building for weeks, time-stamped photographs, credit card statements, restaurant receipts. The Gramercy Hotel. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months. Room 2408. Always charged to our joint account under Client Entertainment. The color drained from Marcus's face. Natalie's champagne glass tilted, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Even Vivian's practiced composure cracked for just a moment. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I scrolled through my phone with practiced ease, each swipe revealing another piece of evidence I'd been collecting like insurance policies against a disaster I'd hoped would never come. La Maison. The private dining room you reserved for your anniversary, Marcus. Except our anniversary is in June. This reservation was for October 15th. Sofia, please, Marcus reached for my phone, but I stepped back smoothly. The jewelry purchases from Cartier. $8,000 in September. I haven't received any gifts, so I have to wonder. I held up the phone so Natalie could see the charge clearly. Oh, and these purchases from Bergdorf Goodman. $12,000 in designer clothing. Size 4. I paused, looking pointedly at Natalie's dress. I'm a size 8. Vivian recovered first, her voice sharp as cut glass. This is hardly appropriate dinner conversation, Sofia. If you have concerns about your marriage, perhaps. My marriage? I laughed, the sound surprising even myself. No, Vivian. Let's talk about my business. Castellano Development Group. You remember, the company I built from nothing? The one that's been funding a significant portion of your lifestyle for the past 5 years? The room went very still. Gregory's Scotch glass paused halfway to his mouth. Richard Langford's satisfied smirk faltered. You see, I've been reviewing our joint accounts. Very interesting patterns emerging. I pulled up a spreadsheet on my phone. The investment consultation fees Montgomery Investments has been charging my company. $75,000 annually for advisory services. Except I never authorized those contracts. Those were standard business arrangements, Vivian said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Corporate partnerships between family entities. Were they? I turned to Richard Langford. You signed the authorization documents. Your signature on the contracts, dated last March. Funny thing, I was in Tokyo that week, closing the Nakamura deal. Yet somehow my electronic signature appears on these agreements. Richard's face flushed. That's standard practice. Spousal authorization for fraud? The word dropped like a stone. Because that's what forging someone's signature is called. Especially when it's used to siphon money from their company. Marcus found his voice, though it trembled slightly. Sofia, you're overreacting. These are routine business. The Aspen condo. I cut him off, my voice measured and cold. The one your mother claimed was a corporate retreat property. I pulled the deed records yesterday. Purchased 18 months ago for $1.2 million. Funded by a loan using my company's assets as collateral. A loan I never signed for, never authorized, never even knew existed. Vivian's hand gripped the back of Natalie's chair, her knuckles white. You had no right to access those records. I had every right. I stepped forward, years of shrinking away from confrontation evaporating. Because according to the paperwork filed with the county recorder's office, I'm listed as a co-owner. My name, my tax identification number, my company's credit rating. All used without my knowledge or consent. This is ridiculous, Vivian snapped. Gregory, tell her. Tell me what? I turned to my father-in-law, who suddenly looked smaller, older. Tell me how you've been using my business credit to fund your wife's shopping habits. The wine collections stored in my company's warehouse. The country club memberships charged to my corporate account as client entertainment. I pulled out a folder from my bag, the one I'd prepared 3 days ago when the full scope of their betrayal had finally crystallized. I had my accountant run a full audit. Nearly $400,000. $400,000, siphoned through creative billing, false contracts, and forged authorizations over the past 3 years. You have no proof, Vivian said, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Don't I? I opened the folder, laying documents across the coffee table one by one. Bank statements. Wire transfer records. Email correspondence between Richard and Marcus discussing the Sofia situation and how to maximize asset extraction before the transition. That's what you called it. Asset extraction. Natalie stood abruptly, her champagne glass forgotten. I didn't know about any of this. Marcus, you said the investments were legitimate. Sit down, Natalie. Vivian's command cracked like a whip. But Natalie remained standing, her sophisticated composure crumbling. And speaking of transitions. I pulled out another document, this one crisp and official. My lawyer filed for divorce this morning at 9 a.m. citing adultery, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The serving papers are being delivered to Marcus's office tomorrow. You can't do this, Marcus said, panic finally breaking through his indifference. We have joint assets, shared investments. We have a prenuptial agreement. I watched his face go from red to ashen. The one you signed so eagerly 9 years ago, assuring me you loved me for who I was, not what I had. Page 12, Section 7. Any assets I owned prior to marriage remain solely mine. Castellano Development Group was established 8 months before we met. But the expansion, Marcus stammered. The new projects, the office building. The office building. I smiled, though it felt like showing teeth. That's interesting. Did your mother forget to mention that particular detail? The building housing Castellano Development Group isn't owned by my company. It's held in a private trust. My grandmother's trust, established in 1982. Vivian's practiced poise shattered completely. That's impossible. We had the property evaluated, the documents showed. Showed what you wanted to see. I gathered my folder, my phone, my dignity. The lease expires December 31st. I declined to renew it last week. You'll need to find new office space for whatever venture you were planning with Natalie. Sofia, wait, Isabel finally spoke, her voice small. But I wasn't interested in her guilt or her excuses. One more thing. I paused at the library door, turning back to face the wreckage of the family that had never really accepted me. The Montgomery Investment Advisory contracts. I terminated all of them this morning. 30 days notice, per the contract terms you forged. After that, you'll need to fund your lifestyle through actual work instead of embezzlement. You vindictive, Vivian started, but I held up my hand. Careful, Vivian. My lawyers are recording this conversation. I pulled out a small device from my purse, its red light blinking steadily. Every threat, every admission. All admissible in court. The eruption was immediate. Vivian's shriek about lawsuits and family loyalty. Marcus's desperate sputtering about misunderstandings and reconciliation. Richard Langford's blustering about corporate law and legal boundaries. Gregory's pathetic attempts to calm everyone down while pouring himself another drink. Only Natalie remained quiet, gathering her designer handbag with the efficient movements of someone recognizing a sinking ship. I think I should leave, she murmured, moving toward the door where I stood. Smart woman, I said quietly. Though your judgment in men could use work. The last thing I saw before walking out was Vivian's face, purple with rage, and Marcus reaching for his phone with shaking hands. Behind me, their perfect family Christmas was dissolving into accusations and panic. The December air hit my face like freedom. My hands shook as I turned the key to my downtown loft, the one Marcus had never even known existed. The lock clicked and I stepped into the space that had been my sanctuary for 2 years, purchased through an LLC my grandmother's attorney had helped me establish, paid for with money I'd earned before Marcus's last name became attached to mine. The city lights twinkled through the industrial windows, Manhattan spreading out below like a constellation of possibilities. This loft was everything the Montgomery mansion wasn't, mine, uncompromised, earned through midnight oil and architectural drafts that had won awards they'd never bothered to attend. I set my purse on the reclaimed wood table and pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls. 38 text messages. The notifications cascaded down the screen like a digital avalanche of desperation. Marcus's name appeared most frequently, followed by Vivian's, then numbers I didn't recognize, probably their lawyers already mobilizing for war. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I walked to the bar cart, vintage copper, found at an estate sale in Brooklyn, and poured 3 fingers of Lagavulin. Not the pretentious bottles Vivian insisted on serving, but the smoky Scottish whiskey my father had taught me to appreciate before he died. Before I'd married into a family that made me forget where I came from. The leather chair faced the windows, and I sank into it, feeling 9 years of memories crash through the dam I'd built. Vivian at our engagement party, pulling me aside to suggest I might want to polish my accent before meeting Gregory's business associates. The way she'd emphasized public school teacher parents every time she introduced me, making my background sound like an apology. Marcus's gradual transformation from defender to bystander to accomplice. On the side table sat a white envelope I'd been avoiding for 3 days. My doctor's office logo in the corner, the pregnancy test results I'd picked up last Monday. The confirmation of what I'd suspected for weeks but hadn't been ready to face. I'd been planning to tell Marcus after I processed it myself, maybe this week. Before Vivian's ambush had shown me exactly how foolish that hope had been. Some dreams deserve to die before they fully formed. My phone buzzed with a call from Jessica. This one, I answered. Sofia? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for an hour. Where are you? Home. My real home. The loft? Relief flooded her voice. Stay there. I'm bringing reinforcements. She arrived 40 minutes later with Thai takeout, 2 bottles of wine, and her laptop bag. One look at my face and she set everything down, pulling me into a hug that smelled of jasmine perfume and fierce loyalty. Tell me everything. So I did. The entire humiliating evening spilled out between bites of pad thai and sips of wine that tasted like vindication. Jessica listened with the focus of someone who understood that sometimes the most important thing was bearing witness. The prenup will protect the company? She asked, already switching into her financial consultant mode. It should. But I've been going through documents for weeks. I pulled out my laptop, opening the folders I'd been organizing in secret. Jess, it's worse than I thought. Look at this. We spread financial records across the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Jessica's eyes widened as she traced the patterns with her finger. These advisory fees to Montgomery Investments, Sofia, this is embezzlement. Systematic, documented embezzlement. Nearly $400,000 over 3 years. And these property transactions. She clicked through deed records, her expression darkening. They used your credit score, your company's assets. This isn't just marital betrayal. This is organized fraud. That's what I thought. I showed her the email chains I'd recovered from the shared server Marcus thought I didn't know about. Read this one. From Vivian to Richard Langford, dated 6 months ago. Jessica read aloud, her voice tight with anger. The Castellano situation needs resolution before the Vandermeer deal closes. Richard assures me the business transfer documentation can be managed discreetly. Marcus is finally seeing reason about appropriate partnerships. Sofia, they've been planning this for months. Maybe longer. There's more. I pulled up another folder, this one labeled simply, contingency. I found these in Marcus's cloud backup. He uses the same password for everything, his mother's birthday, naturally. The documents inside made Jessica's face go pale. Psychiatric evaluation forms, partially filled out. Medical hold procedures. A consultation agreement with a doctor named Harrison Webb, who I'd discovered through a quick search had lost his license in Connecticut but apparently still produced paperwork for the right price. Sofia, they were going to have me committed. Declared mentally unstable. Too irrational to manage my own business affairs. I closed the laptop, my hand surprisingly steady. The timeline matches up with when they'd planned to push through the business transfer. Christmas was supposed to be my exile, the beginning of isolating me from any support system. Jessica stared at the blank laptop screen, processing. We need to call someone. A lawyer, definitely. Maybe the police. This is beyond divorce court territory. I already have. I pulled out a business card. Diana Foster. She specializes in corporate fraud and high net worth divorces. I've had her on retainer for 3 weeks, since I found the first forged signature. 3 weeks. Jessica looked at me with new understanding. You've been planning this. I've been surviving this. I corrected. There's a difference. I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some explanation. But every document I found, every conversation I overheard, every credit card charge that didn't add up, it all pointed to the same conclusion. They never saw me as family. Just as assets to be managed and eventually disposed of. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number with a 212 area code. I let it go to voicemail, but Jessica picked it up when the notification appeared. Sofia, you need to hear this. The voicemail played on speaker. Vivian's voice, no longer honey-coated but sharp with undisguised venom. You think you're clever, but you're nothing without the Montgomery name. I've made 3 calls tonight and you're already being blacklisted from every development board in the city. You'll never work in Manhattan again. Marcus has friends, powerful friends who understand what happens to unstable women who make false accusations. Return the documents you've stolen and we can resolve this quietly. Otherwise, we'll destroy what's left of your pathetic little architecture career." Jessica's jaw dropped. She just threatened you. On a recorded line. Is she insane? She's desperate. I saved the voicemail, adding it to my growing file of evidence. They were so certain I'd crumble. That years of making me feel inferior had actually made me inferior. They forgot that I built everything they wanted to steal. That I survived in this industry by being better, working harder, and documenting everything. What happens now? I looked out at the city lights, thinking about the girl who'd arrived here 15 years ago with a portfolio and a dream. Thinking about the woman who'd let herself be diminished for the illusion of belonging. Thinking about who I might become now that the illusion had shattered. Now? I picked up my phone and opened my contacts. Now we go to war. The pounding on my door came at 6 in the morning, aggressive and unrelenting. Through the peephole, I saw Isabel, Marcus's sister, mascara streaked down her face, designer coat wrinkled, hands shaking with what looked like withdrawal tremors. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Please." Her voice cracked. "I need help. Mother froze all my accounts. My credit cards are declined. I can't even pay for my hotel room. Why would I help you?" I leaned against the doorframe, studying the woman who'd sat silently while her family tried to destroy me. "You were there last night. You said nothing." "Because I'm a coward." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've always been a coward. But Sofia, I can't do this anymore. What they did to you, what they're planning, it's not the first time." That got my attention. I stepped aside, letting her into the loft. Isabel collapsed on my sofa, pulling a flash drive from her purse with trembling fingers. Natalie Ashford isn't the first woman Marcus has had an affair with. There were 2 others before her. Christine Palmer, an associate at his firm. And Sarah Winters, a client's daughter. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. Mother encouraged it. She called them appropriate connections and said your marriage was always meant to be temporary." Isabel's voice dropped to a whisper. "They've been planning to remove you since you refused to add Marcus's name to your company documents 2 years ago." I took the flash drive, my hand steady despite the rage building in my chest. "What's on this?" "Everything. Emails between Mother and Richard Langford going back 5 years. Financial records showing how they've done this before, to Gregory's first business partner, to his brother's wife, to 3 other women whose companies they wanted to acquire." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'll testify. I'll give you access to Mother's private email, her offshore account passwords. Everything. Her voice broke. Just give me enough money to get into rehab. Somewhere she can't find me." I wrote the check without hesitation. $10,000. Enough to disappear and start healing. Isabel provided the passwords, adding something that made my blood run cold. "Father isn't just an enabler. He's been embezzling from his own investment clients for years. Mother knows. She's been helping him hide it through shell companies and falsified records. The Vandermeer deal wasn't about expansion. It was about covering their tracks before the SEC investigation closes in. The SEC is already investigating them? For 6 months. Isabel stood, steadier now that she'd unburdened her conscience. Mother doesn't know I found out. But 3 of Father's clients filed complaints about missing pension funds. She's been panicking, trying to secure assets through your company before everything collapses. After Isabel left, I called Diana Foster. My lawyer arrived within the hour, impeccably dressed despite the early morning summons, carrying a leather portfolio that suggested she'd been preparing for this call. "I've reviewed the documents you sent over." Diana spread files across my coffee table with surgical precision. "Sofia, this goes beyond divorce proceedings. We're looking at RICO violations, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. Pattern of fraud, conspiracy, interstate wire fraud. RICO? Like what they use against organized crime families? Exactly. The Montgomery operation has been systematically defrauding companies for over a decade. Your case is just the most recent. She pulled out a folder. I'd been contacted by attorneys representing 3 other women. Similar patterns: marriage to wealthy men, pressure to merge assets, eventual replacement with more suitable partners, systematic theft of their businesses. They've done this before. Multiple times. And they've gotten away with it because their victims were too intimidated or financially ruined to fight back. But you, Sofia, you documented everything. You kept separate accounts. You protected your assets. Diana's smile was sharp. You're the catalyst we've been waiting for. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered on speaker. Mrs. Castellano? A woman's voice, professional and careful. This is Natalie Ashford. Please don't hang up. I have information you need. Diana nodded for me to continue. I'm listening. We need to meet. In person. Somewhere public. Natalie's voice trembled slightly. What Marcus told me about you, about your marriage, about the business arrangements, it was all lies. And I think I've been set up to take the fall for something much bigger than an affair. We met 2 hours later at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the Montgomery social circle. Natalie arrived carrying a banker's box, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept. Diana sat beside me, recording everything on her phone. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Natalie set the box on the table between us. What I did was wrong regardless of what Marcus told me. But I need you to understand, I was being used too. She opened the box, revealing organized folders and multiple USB drives. Marcus approached me 6 months ago. Said his wife was mentally unstable, that you'd built the company during a manic episode and now refused proper medication. He showed me forged psychiatric evaluations, told me you'd been involuntarily hospitalized before. All lies. I know that now. Natalie pulled out a folder. 3 days ago, I overheard Vivian and Richard discussing their exit strategy. They weren't just planning to take your company. They were planning to frame me for the embezzlement. Make it look like I convinced Marcus to steal from you, then disappeared with the money. Diana leaned forward. Do you have proof? Recordings. Natalie handed over her phone. I started recording everything after that conversation. Vivian discussing how to doctor financial records. Richard explaining how they'd pinned the offshore transfers on me. Marcus agreeing to testify that I seduced him and manipulated the business documents. Why come forward now? Because I looked you up. Actually looked you up, not just accepted their narrative. Natalie's voice hardened. Your company has transformed 4 neighborhoods. You've won awards for sustainable development. You've created affordable housing without displacing communities. Everything they said about you was the opposite of the truth. And I realized, if they lied about you, they're lying about everything. Diana was already reviewing the recordings, her expression growing more satisfied with each file. This is admissible. Conspiracy, fraud, criminal intent. They documented their own crimes. There's more. Natalie pulled out a final folder. Richard Langford has been running this scheme for 20 years. 5 companies, 3 failed marriages, 2 women who ended up institutionalized. I hired a private investigator when I realized I was being set up. He found everything, the pattern, the victims, the offshore accounts. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Kevin from your office. Emergency. Montgomery people showed up with a court order trying to seize company files. Rebecca and James are stalling them. How should we proceed? I looked at Diana, then at Natalie, then at the evidence spread between us. Tell them I'm calling an emergency meeting. Everyone. Rosewood Cafe, 9 a.m. I typed back. Then I looked at Diana. How fast can you file for a restraining order? Already drafting it. Her fingers flew across her tablet. I'll have it to a judge within the hour. Good. I stood, gathering the evidence that would end the Montgomery dynasty. Because we're not hiding anymore. The Rosewood Cafe occupied a converted warehouse in the Arts District. I arrived early, securing the private room. One by one, my team filtered in, 43 employees facing an existential threat. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, I told them. The Montgomery family attempted a hostile takeover. They failed, but they're not finished. Rebecca stood, her voice steady despite trembling hands. 3 months ago, Marcus cornered me in the parking garage. He touched me inappropriately, then threatened my job if I reported it. I documented everything. James stood next. I have security footage. Marcus and Natalie meeting in your office after hours for months. Going through files, downloading data. I saved everything. One after another, my employees revealed their quiet resistance. By meeting's end, all 43 pledged not just loyalty but action. That afternoon, Jessica introduced me to Michael Torres, former FBI agent, white-collar crime specialist. He spread the Montgomery financial documents across the table with practiced expertise. 22 years in white-collar crime division, and this is some of the sloppiest money laundering I've seen. But you documented everything, and that changes the game entirely. Can you help us? I already am. I've been consulting with the SEC investigator assigned to the Montgomery case. Your documentation is exactly what they need to move from investigation to indictment. My phone rang. Ms. Castellano? This is Elena Reyes, your mother-in-law's housekeeper. I was fired this morning for listening at doors. But before I left, I took something from her safe you need to see. We met her an hour later in a diner. Elena was in her 70s, carrying a manila envelope like it contained explosives. I've worked for Mrs. Montgomery for 15 years. I've watched her destroy 3 women before you. She pulled out surveillance photos, dozens of me, taken over months. Each time stamped and annotated. When he found nothing, she had him create false evidence. Photoshopped images, forged documents, manufactured witnesses. Why are you telling me this? Because my daughter was one of those women. 20 years ago, they had her committed based on falsified evidence. She spent 3 years institutionalized. She never recovered. Her hand gripped mine. I couldn't stay silent anymore. The envelope contained everything: the investigators' reports, communications with the fake psychiatrist, payment records, emails discussing my planned breakdown. Michael reviewed it with growing satisfaction. This isn't just fraud anymore. This is conspiracy, attempted false imprisonment, witness tampering. Federal charges across multiple states. My phone buzzed with a text. This is Adrian Blackwell. Jessica gave me your number. I've been following the Montgomery situation. They tried this same scheme with my sister 5 years ago. I have resources that might help. Can we meet? He wants to help, I said, showing Michael and Diana the message. Diana's smile was sharp. Then let's see what happens when the Montgomerys face someone with equal power and better lawyers. The morning after my meeting with Adrian Blackwell arrived with violence I should have anticipated. I was reviewing blueprints in my office when Kevin burst through the door, his face pale with panic. Sofia, Marcus is here. With security guards and what looks like federal marshals. They're saying they have a court order to seize company assets. I walked to the lobby to find my husband flanked by 2 men in uniform, waving papers like weapons. After his failed attempt to lock me out of the building last month, the security audit that IT had immediately reversed and flagged, he'd apparently decided legal intimidation was the next move. Employees had gathered, phones raised, capturing everything. In the age of social media, nothing stayed private for long. Emergency conservatorship order. Marcus's voice carried that particular smugness that suggested he thought he'd won. Signed by Judge Patterson this morning. Due to your documented mental instability and erratic business decisions, I'm assuming temporary control of Castellano development operations. Diana appeared beside me. I'd called her the moment Kevin's warning came through. She snatched the papers from Marcus's hand, scanning them with practiced efficiency. Interesting. Her voice cut through the tension. Filed at 6 this morning. Unfortunately for you, our injunction was filed at midnight. No changes to company control or assets without a full evidentiary hearing. Date set for January 22nd. She produced her own documents, far more substantial than his single page. Additionally, restraining order prohibiting you from entering these premises or contacting any employees. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Marcus's face contorted, veins bulging in his neck. This is my wife's company. I have legal rights. Estranged wife's company. Diana interrupted. Divorce papers were filed 3 days ago. Fault grounds including adultery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The serving papers were delivered to your office yesterday at 2 p.m. You were with Natalie Ashford at the time. In your office. With the door locked. The lobby had filled with more employees, several still recording. Marcus spotted the phones and something inside him snapped. He lunged toward me, screaming about manipulation and lies, how I'd poisoned everyone against him, how I'd never amount to anything without the Montgomery name. The security guards he'd brought looked uncertain, especially when our actual building security appeared. One of them stepped between us, his hand on Marcus's chest. Sir, you need to leave the premises. Now. You'll regret this. Marcus shouted as they escorted him toward the exit. My mother has connections. Real power. You think you can win against us? You're nothing without our name. Nobody will work with you. I'll destroy what's left of your pathetic career. Rebecca called out from the gathered crowd. Actually, she built this company before she ever met you. Others murmured agreement, and Marcus's face went from red to purple as security pushed him through the doors. He kept screaming threats until his voice faded into the street outside. Kevin held up his phone, a slight smile on his face. Already trending. #ToxicHusband. The internet is having a field day with his meltdown. Across town, something even more dramatic was unfolding. Michael Torres had given me the heads up. Vivian was walking into what she thought would be a routine board meeting at Montgomery Investments, unaware that her empire was crumbling in real time. Harrison Walsh, Gregory's mentor for 30 years, stood as Vivian entered the boardroom. According to Michael's source who texted me updates, Vivian swept in wearing Chanel and diamonds, radiating her usual entitled confidence. We need to discuss some concerning irregularities, Harrison announced without preamble. Financial discrepancies in accounts you've managed. Several, in fact. Vivian tried her usual tactics, charm, deflection, then intimidation. But Harrison produced copies of the falsified invoices, the offshore account records, the trail of stolen funds that Isabel had provided. This is preposterous. Vivian's voice echoed through the speaker on Michael's phone as he shared the audio with me. My daughter-in-law is having some kind of breakdown. She's fabricating evidence out of spite. The SEC doesn't think so. Board member Catherine Morrison interrupted. They've opened a formal investigation. We're conducting an internal audit immediately. Every account, every transaction, going back 10 years. I demand you stop this nonsense immediately. Motion to suspend Vivian Montgomery pending investigation. Harrison's voice was firm. All in favor? Every hand raised except Vivian's. The vote was unanimous. You'll all regret this, Vivian hissed, her polished facade shattering. I built half your careers. One phone call and you'll be blacklisted from every country club, every charity board, every. Security will escort you out. Catherine's voice was ice. And Vivian? Those threats were recorded. I'd suggest you contact your lawyer. The call from Isabel came at 11 that night, her voice barely a whisper. Sofia, you need to call the police. Mother's here. She's drunk and threatening to break down my door. She knows I gave you the files. I could hear banging in the background, Vivian's slurred shouting about family loyalty and betrayal and consequences. I dialed 911 on my second phone while keeping Isabel on the line, then called Michael. We need to get to her apartment. Now. Michael picked me up in his sedan, driving with controlled urgency. We arrived as police cars pulled up, lights flashing against the building. Through Isabel's phone, still connected, we heard the door splinter, her scream, then officers shouting commands. By the time we reached her apartment, Vivian was in handcuffs, still ranting about ungrateful children and stolen legacies. Isabel sat on her couch, holding ice against a bruised cheek where Vivian had struck her, but her eyes blazed with determination. I'm done protecting her. She looked at the officer taking her statement. You want to know about family secrets? She had my grandmother's cat euthanized during her chemotherapy because feeding it was inconvenient. Charged the funeral to company expenses. She's been hiding assets in my grandmother's name for years. The woman's been dead for 4 years and mother's still filing taxes using her social security number. The officer's eyebrows rose. That's tax fraud. Identity theft. Multiple felonies. Add it to the list. Isabel's voice was flat, emotionless. I'll give you access to every account, every forged document, every illegal transfer. I have copies of everything. The next morning brought a new assault. Diana called me at dawn, her voice tight with controlled anger. They filed new motions. Claiming you're psychologically unstable following a recent miscarriage. They're using your medical records. The word hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto my couch, hand instinctively moving to my stomach. How did they know? I only found out 2 weeks ago. I haven't told anyone. They accessed your medical records illegally. The receptionist at your gynecologist's office is Natalie's cousin, Emma Ashford. She pulled your files and passed the information to Marcus. The violation felt worse than all the financial crimes combined. This was my body, my private grief, weaponized against me. The pregnancy I discovered just weeks ago, ended by stress before it truly began, now turned into ammunition. That's a HIPAA violation. My voice came out stronger than I felt. Federal crime. Exactly. Emma Ashford is looking at federal prosecution. But Sofia, they're going to try using this in court. Claim you're emotionally unstable, unable to manage business affairs. Let them try. I stood, grief transforming into steel. Add it to the charges. Show the world what kind of people they really are. Outside my window, the city was waking up. People starting normal days with normal problems. But I was done being normal. I was done being the victim in someone else's cruel game. Diana, how long until the evidentiary hearing? 3 weeks. Then we have 3 weeks to build an airtight case. I looked at my reflection in the window, seeing someone new staring back. They wanted war. Let's give them one they'll never forget. I spent the afternoon in my loft, surrounded by legal documents and evidence files, trying to maintain the clinical distance I'd perfected over weeks of preparation. But the medical records violation kept pulling me back to the white envelope on my side table, the pregnancy test results I'd never opened, the dream I'd let die before it fully formed. Jessica found me there at sunset, staring at the envelope like it might contain answers instead of confirmation of loss. You don't have to open it, she said quietly, sitting beside me on the couch. Not today. Not ever, if you don't want to. They opened it for me. My voice sounded hollow. Marcus, Vivian, they're lawyers. They all know something I couldn't bring myself to face. They turned my grief into a legal strategy. Sofia. I was going to tell him that night. At the Montgomery estate. The words spilled out, bitter and raw. I had this whole speech planned. About new beginnings, about the family we'd always talked about starting. I even brought my grandmother's compass as a symbol, finding our way together through something new. Jessica's hand found mine. You couldn't have known. But I should have. I opened my laptop, pulling up the timeline I'd been constructing. Look at the dates. The first forged signature on company documents? 3 weeks ago. The offshore account transfer? 2 weeks ago, the day after I scheduled my doctor's appointment for the test. They were tracking everything, Jess. My medical appointments, my schedule, my vulnerable moments. They weaponized my suspicions before I even had confirmation. The realization made me feel physically ill. The stress they put me under, the security lockout, the Christmas ambush, the legal threats, they caused the miscarriage. And then they used it as evidence that I was unstable. My phone buzzed with an email from Diana. Subject line, urgent, new evidence. I opened it to find forwarded messages between Marcus and Dr. Harrison Webb, the fake psychiatrist. Marcus, need documentation dated last week. Sofia's been showing signs of paranoia, erratic behavior, emotional instability. Webb, based on the medical information you provided about her recent miscarriage, I can construct a narrative of psychological breakdown. Depression, inability to process grief, dangerous decision-making. We'll have evaluation ready by Friday. Marcus, perfect. Mother says timing is critical. The Vandermeer deal needs to close before she can contest anything. They were going to have me committed. I showed Jessica the emails. Not just discredited or divorced. Actually institutionalized. Based on manufactured evidence about my grief over a pregnancy they caused me to lose. Jessica read through the messages, her face going pale. This is beyond fraud. This is evil. I finished. Calculated, systematic evil. Another email arrived, this one from Michael Torres. He'd been digging into Dr. Webb's background. Turned out Webb had been involved in 3 similar cases, wealthy men having their wives committed on false pretenses to gain control of assets. In 2 cases, the women had been institutionalized for years before the truth emerged. In 1 case, the woman never recovered from the psychological damage. Elena's daughter, I whispered, remembering the housekeeper's story. That's why she came forward. She watched her daughter destroyed by the same scheme. The weight of it crashed over me, not just what they'd tried to do to me, but the pattern of destruction they'd left behind. How many women had they targeted? How many lives had they ruined? My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Castellano? A woman's voice, professional but warm. This is Dr. Patricia Kim from the Medical Ethics Board. I understand you filed a complaint about unauthorized access to your medical records. Yes. By Natalie Ashford's cousin, Emma Ashford. She works at my gynecologist's office. I need you to know that we take HIPAA violations extremely seriously. Ms. Ashford has been terminated, and we're cooperating fully with federal prosecutors. Dr. Kim paused. But I'm calling because there's more. Ms. Ashford accessed records for 17 other women over the past 3 years. All of them connected to the Montgomery family in some way, former employees, business partners' wives, potential targets for their schemes. 17 other women. 17 other violations. The scope of their operation kept expanding. We're contacting all the affected patients, Dr. Kim continued. Several have already come forward with stories similar to yours. Medical information used as blackmail or leverage. Pregnancies, miscarriages, health conditions, all weaponized against them. After the call ended, I sat in the gathering darkness of my loft, processing the enormity of what I'd uncovered. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. I was just the latest in a long line of women they'd tried to destroy. Jessica pulled up news articles on her laptop. Look at this. Montgomery Investments, 5 years ago. Partner buyout that went hostile. The partner's wife ended up institutionalized for mental health issues. Sound familiar? Another article, 8 years back. Gregory's business associate, accused of embezzlement, his wife committed for psychological evaluation during the investigation. Charges were eventually dropped, but by then their company had been absorbed by Montgomery Investments. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. We need to document all of this, I said, my voice stronger now. Every case, every victim. Show that this isn't isolated incidents, it's a criminal enterprise spanning decades. Diana called at midnight with news that solidified my resolve. The federal prosecutors want to meet with you. They're building a RICO case, but they need your testimony to tie everything together. Sofia, you'd be the primary witness against the Montgomery family. It means depositions, grand jury testimony, potentially a trial that could last months. When do they want to meet? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Federal Building downtown. Diana's voice carried a note of concern. This is going to get ugly. They'll attack your credibility, your mental state, your motives. Every private detail of your life will be examined. I thought about the white envelope on my table, the pregnancy I'd never told anyone about. The grief I'd been processing in isolation while they'd been planning to use it as a weapon. Let them, I said finally. I'm done hiding. I'm done protecting their secrets to spare myself embarrassment. If my story helps other women avoid what I went through, what Elena's daughter went through, then it's worth it. There's something else, Diana added. Adrian Blackwell called. He wants to move up your meeting. I looked at the evidence spread across my coffee table, years of systematic abuse and fraud, documented in bank statements and forged signatures and illegally accessed medical records. Somewhere in this paper trail was the key to destroying the Montgomery empire completely. Set up the meeting, I told Diana. With the prosecutors and with Blackwell. It's time to end this. After hanging up, I finally picked up the white envelope. Opened it slowly, hands steady despite the pain building in my chest. The results confirmed what I'd already known, pregnant, then not pregnant. A beginning that ended before it could truly start. But unlike the grief they'd tried to weaponize, unlike the pain they tried to use as evidence of instability, I let myself feel it fully. Cried for the child that might have been. Cried for the woman I'd been who thought she could make the Montgomery family love her. Cried for all the women they destroyed before me. And when the tears stopped, I stood up, placed the envelope in my evidence file, and got back to work. The federal building loomed against the morning sky, all concrete and glass authority. I arrived with Diana at 8:30, both of us carrying briefcases heavy with evidence. Michael Torres met us in the lobby, introducing us to the people who would make or break our case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper suits extended her hand. I've been building cases against white-collar criminals for 15 years. The Montgomery file is the most comprehensive documentation of fraud I've ever seen. She led us to a conference room where 2 FBI agents and an SEC investigator waited, surrounded by whiteboards covered in organizational charts and financial flow diagrams. At the center of every diagram, like a spider in a web, was Vivian Montgomery's name. We've been investigating the Montgomerys for 8 months, Jennifer began, pulling up a presentation on the large screen. 3 pension funds, totaling $47 million, reported suspicious activity after Gregory Montgomery's firm managed their accounts. But we couldn't prove anything, until your evidence connected all the pieces. The screen showed a timeline stretching back 20 years. Each marker represented a company absorbed, a marriage ended, a woman discredited or destroyed. The pattern was unmistakable once laid out in visual form. We need your testimony to establish the pattern, Jennifer continued. But more importantly, we need them to incriminate themselves one more time. On record. With witnesses. You want to wire me, I said, understanding immediately. We want to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Michael pulled out a small device from his briefcase. Vivian's been escalating, the assault on Isabel, the threats on your voicemail, the attempted conservatorship. She's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Diana leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? We've scheduled a mediation hearing for Monday, Jennifer explained. Required before the criminal trial can proceed. The Montgomery's lawyers will push for settlement, claim everything was a misunderstanding. We want Sofia to agree to meet with them privately, ostensibly to discuss terms. You want me to get them to confess on tape. We want you to let them think they're winning. Jennifer's smile was predatory. Give them an opening. Let Vivian believe she can intimidate you into silence one more time. Her ego won't let her resist gloating, explaining exactly how clever she's been. And when she does, we'll have everything we need for the RICO charges. Michael finished. Conspiracy, fraud, extortion, witness tampering. All caught on federal recording equipment. The SEC investigator, a quiet man named Robert Chin, spoke up for the first time. There's also the matter of the Vandermeer deal. They've been using your company's reputation to fraudulently secure investment capital. If we can get them to discuss that on record, we can freeze all their assets before they can move money offshore. I thought about all the women who'd come before me. The ones who'd been institutionalized or discredited or destroyed. The ones who tried to fight back and failed because they didn't have enough evidence, enough allies, enough resources. What do you need from me? Jennifer pulled out a detailed script. We've prepared talking points. Things to say that will trigger their need to explain, to justify, to threaten. The key is getting them to explicitly state their intentions, taking your company, the institutionalization plan, the Vandermeer deal structure. We spent the next 3 hours in preparation. Role-playing scenarios. Testing the recording equipment. Going over every possible contingency. By noon, I could recite the talking points in my sleep. Adrian Blackwell arrived at 2 p.m., transforming the energy in the room immediately. Tall, mid-40s, with the kind of presence that came from building a billion-dollar empire from scratch. But his eyes held something else, a familiar pain that came from loss. Ms. Castellano. His handshake was firm, his voice carrying traces of grief despite the professional demeanor. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Jessica said your sister was involved with the Montgomerys. His jaw tightened. Caroline. 5 years ago, she married into what she thought was a respectable family. 6 months later, she was dead. Officially ruled a suicide, but I've spent 5 years proving it was murder disguised as mental illness. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick file. I've been investigating the Montgomery operation since Caroline's death. Private investigators, forensic accountants, international asset traces. I've spent $3 million and countless sleepless nights documenting their crimes. The file contained everything: offshore accounts in 15 countries, shell companies spanning 3 decades, a network of corrupt doctors and lawyers who'd enabled the scheme. Names I recognized, including Dr. Harrison Webb. Webb was the one who signed Caroline's psychiatric hold, Adrian said, his voice tight with controlled rage. Based on manufactured evidence of bipolar disorder. She spent 3 months institutionalized while her husband, Gregory Montgomery's nephew, drained her company accounts. By the time the truth came out, she'd lost everything. 2 weeks after her release, she drove her car off a bridge. The room fell silent. Jennifer Walsh reviewed the documents with growing excitement. This fills in the gaps, she said. International fraud, potentially even RICO predicate acts we hadn't discovered. Mr. Blackwell, would you be willing to testify? I've been waiting 5 years for someone to ask. Adrian turned to me. When Jessica told me about your situation, I knew this was my opportunity. The Montgomerys think they're untouchable because they've gotten away with it for so long. But they've never faced someone with your documentation and my resources combined. He pulled out another document, a purchase agreement. Blackwell Industries wants to acquire Castellano Development Group. Your current valuation is $15 million. I'm offering $45 million, 3 times fair market value. Your employees keep their positions, you retain creative control, and you get the protection of a company large enough that the Montgomerys can't touch it. I stared at the numbers. $45 million. More than enough to fund the legal battle and ensure my team's security regardless of the outcome. There's one condition, Adrian added. You have to see this through to the end. Testify, where the wire, help put them away for good. I won't let Caroline's death be in vain, and I won't let them do to you what they did to her. We're setting up the meeting for tomorrow evening, Jennifer explained. The Montgomery's lawyer has requested a private session at their estate. 7 p.m. We'll have agents positioned around the property, but you'll be alone in the room with them. If at any point you feel unsafe, I'll be fine. I surprised myself with how steady my voice sounded. They've underestimated me from the beginning. Let's let them keep thinking I'm the scared, broken woman they tried to create. Michael handed me the wire, a tiny device that would be virtually undetectable under clothing. We'll brief you again tomorrow on final protocols. But Sofia, I need you to understand, this is dangerous. Vivian assaulted her own daughter when cornered. If she realizes what you're doing, then make sure the agents are close enough to intervene. I met his eyes. I've spent 9 years being afraid of these people. Shrinking to fit their expectations, apologizing for my success. I'm done with that. If they want to threaten me, let them do it on federal recording equipment. Diana reviewed the plan one more time, highlighting risks and contingencies. But I barely heard her. My mind was already in that library at the Montgomery estate, imagining Vivian's face when she realized the trap had been set months ago and she'd walked right into it. One more thing, Jennifer said as we prepared to leave. Christmas Day. That's when they're hosting the Vandermeer family gathering. The one you were banned from. We've obtained surveillance warrants for the estate. Every room will be monitored. If everything goes according to plan tomorrow night, we'll have enough for arrest warrants. Christmas morning, federal agents will arrive with a very different kind of present. The wire felt cold against my skin as Michael adjusted it in the unmarked van. FBI agents checked weapons. Prosecutors reviewed protocols. Remember the talking points, Jennifer said. Get them to explain. Let Vivian gloat. Diana squeezed my hand. Agents at every entrance. Code word grandmother, and they're through the door. Adrian appeared. Ready? I'm your business advisor. Vivian invited me herself. She has no idea I've been building this case for 5 years. We drove to the estate. The Montgomery mansion blazed with lights. But this time, I was setting the trap. Vivian opened the door. Sofia, darling. And Mr. Blackwell. How lovely. The library held Gregory drinking, Marcus avoiding my eyes, Richard looking smug. Let's dispense with pleasantries, Vivian said. All this unpleasantness could have been avoided if you'd been reasonable. Reasonable? You banned me from Christmas. Tried to take my company. Oh, don't be dramatic. Your little architecture hobby always needed adult supervision. You married above your station. The Vandermeer family expects refinement. How long have you been planning this? Vivian smiled. Since you refused to add Marcus to documents. 2 years ago. More direct intervention was required. The forged signatures? The embezzlement? Creative accounting, Richard said. Your company generated revenue. We utilized resources for more sophisticated leadership. And the plan to institutionalize me? Vivian's eyes gleamed. You were becoming unstable. We were being responsible. You accessed my medical records. Used my miscarriage as evidence. Vivian smiled. Grief can be destabilizing. Documentation of existing concerns. You caused the miscarriage. The stress, the attacks. Oh, please. If you weren't strong enough to handle business pressure, you weren't fit to run a company. Natural selection. Adrian spoke, deadly calm. So you systematically defrauded her company, forged documents, illegally accessed medical records, and planned false commitment, all for the Vandermeer deal? We planned to merge resources efficiently, Richard corrected. And if I sign your settlement? $2 million. Your employees keep jobs under new management. We drop legal actions. $2 million for a company valued at $15 million. $2 million for not fighting a battle you'll lose. We have resources you can't match. This was decided before it began. I stood slowly. You're right. This was decided before it began. But not how you think. I pressed play on my phone. Their voices filled the room, every confession played back. What is this? Federal recording equipment. I showed the wire. Every word. All on tape. FBI agents burst in. Marcus dropped to his knees. Gregory's glass shattered. Richard was tackled. Only Vivian stood frozen as Jennifer Walsh appeared with the arrest warrant. Vivian Montgomery, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, extortion, witness tampering, and RICO violations. Vivian shrieked. This is entrapment. I have connections. That's witness intimidation, Michael said. Add it to the list. Marcus cried. Sofia, please. I love you. You locked me out of my building. Forged my signature. Planned to institutionalize me. Love isn't what you think it is. As agents led them out, I stood in the library that had witnessed my humiliation. Everything had changed. I'd changed. The next morning, headlines screamed, Montgomery Empire collapses, RICO charges filed, decades of fraud exposed. Jessica called. 17 other women have come forward. Your courage gave them courage. Diana reported frozen assets, recovered pension funds, Vivian denied bail. Christmas Eve, Isabel arrived, 6 weeks sober, carrying a box. Inside was a key to Vivian's secret safe deposit box. Evidence going back 30 years. That afternoon, federal agents photographed the contents. Bank statements. Property deeds. Photographs of victims with vulnerability notes. The damning ledger. Handwritten, detailing every scheme since 1995. A criminal's diary in ink and arrogance. She kept records of every crime, Michael breathed. Arrogance has its own logic, Adrian said. The entitled never believe consequences will reach them. This changes everything, Jennifer said. We're looking at life sentences. Multiple life sentences. Christmas morning arrived crisp and cold. I stood on the helipad wearing emerald and my grandmother's compass displayed proudly. Ready? Adrian asked. I've been ready for 9 years. Let's crash a Christmas party. The helicopter descended onto the Montgomery estate lawn. I stepped out first, rotor wash catching my dress. We walked with the confidence of people holding all the cards. The Vandermeer family stood frozen. Thomas pulled out his phone, face going pale. The Montgomerys were arrested last night. Fraud, racketeering. The SEC froze all assets. I provided the evidence, I said. The operation was built on decades of fraud. The Vandermeers departed within minutes. Federal agents appeared. Jennifer emerged with evidence boxes. The estate is being seized. Every asset liquidated to compensate victims. I walked through the empty house one final time. It felt smaller now. Just expensive things purchased with stolen money and broken dreams. 6 months later, the Castellano Foundation overlooked Central Park, dedicated to protecting women entrepreneurs. In 6 months, we'd helped 23 companies, provided legal support to 47 women, created a database connecting victims with resources. Jessica updated me. Trial in 3 months. Vivian faces 32 counts. Marcus got 12 years. Gregory 25. And Isabel? Completed rehab. Working as a counselor. Testifying with no immunity. Richard Langford got 18 years. Dr. Webb 15. Emma Ashford 3 years and lost her credentials. But the real change was the phone calls, women finding courage to report abusers. 17 became 50, then hundreds. A movement refusing silence. My Brooklyn brownstone was peaceful. Every piece chosen by me. No ghosts, no bad memories. Adrian and I had dinner every Tuesday, companionship evolving slowly. How are you really doing? He asked one evening. I planted a tree last week. A cherry tree. For the baby that didn't make it. His hand found mine. Caroline would have liked that. Creating something beautiful from grief. I'm not the same person who walked into that library 6 months ago. I don't know who I'm becoming yet. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we're both allowed to figure it out as we go.